speaking first, because by the time everybody else speaks, you'll have forgotten what I said, so it doesn't matter what I say. So I can just talk rubbish and get away with it, which is what I usually do. And the second is something that I'm a little bit annoyed about, and that's, well, two things to do with the humanist society. First of all, when being introduced, you said that this is where you would have important meetings. Whereas the last time I was down, it was in the Radisson where you have your ordinary meeting, so I wasn't important enough to be here the last time. And the second thing about that was that there was protests, a reasonable sized protest outside the Radisson, and I'm obviously not important enough anymore to get that, so I'm faded in the background. Now to get back to the more serious aspect of it here. I was looking up from sitting down there and reading a quote on the wall, and I think I can still read it sideways. Fairies, come take me out of this dull world, for I can ride with you upon your wind. And that to me sums up to a great extent what this is all about. That people deciding for themselves that this world has had enough for them, or they've had enough of this world. And I suppose that's where most of the people that I come across with this issue, and where I started in this issue, that I'll get into in a few minutes, that's where it really comes from. People having a choice for themselves. We're given this life, we don't have any choice about that. Our parents made that, well, not necessarily made the decision in a lot of cases, because people are born accidentally as well, but that it's our life. And even religious people would say God gives us our life. That's kind of conditional. We're given that life. You don't give a present to someone and say, you can only do this with it, or you have to do that with it. Once you're given something, it's yours to do what you want. Now, I know that the people will say about suicide, what I call irrational suicide, it's a very difficult thing to deal with. And unfortunately, there's only one word to describe the taking of your own life in the English language, and that is suicide. So it's equated with this as well. And I can understand the situation of people losing someone out of, I suppose, torment for a different reason than the sort of torment we're talking about. But that's enough of that sort of thing. As it was said earlier on, I got involved in this because of an absolutely wonderful woman. I had the, I suppose, honour of meeting Mary. Mary and I were both married beforehand, although it says up there that her husband being protective. Her husband didn't even know her at that stage, but that's neither here nor there. We met, and it was very obvious from the day we met. We met accidentally, and it was very obvious that things could get serious between us. And I didn't know that Mary had MS at the time, and she told me very quickly, because if it progressed to the way it did, I mean, a lot of people live with MS very comfortable lives for the rest of their life, but Mary was one of the unlucky ones, and she didn't. And she told me because her husband, as it put it there, had actually walked out on her when she got diagnosed with MS, because he didn't want to go through. And that was the reason that she told me. But the thing that I didn't know about Mary then, she gave me, as she put it herself, she gave me the opportunity to walk. And I'm so glad that I didn't. But she gave me that chance. But one of the things I didn't know about Mary at that time was her, I suppose, previous existence, if that's the way to put it. And an awful lot of people don't know how strong and what a wonderful woman Mary was. She got pregnant out of wedlock in Donegal when she was quite young, and the parish priest shipped her off to a mother and baby home in Belfast with her father's permission. And to give you an idea how strong Mary was even at that age, she was one of the first people in Ireland to leave the mother and baby home with her baby. She fought them in there at that age. Although her father was against it, she fought the mother and baby home to leave the mother and baby home with her baby. And that baby now is Karina, her daughter, one of my best friends. So as I say, that to give you an idea of the strength of Mary. So that when she brought up this situation as her MS was progressing and we were planning, I suppose, to make things more comfortable, when she brought up the situation that she wouldn't be around, I knew that it wasn't something that she was saying in passing. It was something that she was very serious about. And I took it seriously. The only legal option then was to go, well, the only legal option still is to leave the country. Dignitas was the only organisation that existed, and we joined Dignitas. And I got to know the people in Dignitas very well since then. But we joined, but I knew Marty didn't want to. Die earlier than she wanted, and that was the only option that was available. Again, the options available in Dignitas at the time, the only options were to swallow the liquid itself, and that's still some of the case there in some of the places in Switzerland. Happily, I've worked very hard on that with the Swiss authorities, that it now can be an infusion. But the problem with the drinking was that Mary's swallow was being affected by the MS. So we were constantly checking to see how much she could drink, and it was getting very close to the limit on what she could take in one go in Dignitas. And I asked her, and I'm sure you've probably heard me say this before, I asked her, did she want to go then? And she said no. So we took the plan into our own hands, and although Jamie said that a lot of people take it into their own hands, there are very, very safe ways of planning for yourself, that you don't have to travel anywhere. Now, you have to break the law to do that, and we were quite prepared to do that. And this is how the court case came about, because Mary had the assurance that whenever she wanted to go, she could. And the I suppose, comfort that gave her, it was incredible. We brought the Nembutal in from a person, unfortunately, he doesn't send anymore. He's gone out of business. A guy called Dave Dorian in Mexico. DHL delivered our Nembutal to the door, even though the DHL driver had no idea what he was delivering. But as soon as that arrived, we just relaxed and got on with living. And that's one of the things I see so many places in the world, that when people have that option, they don't worry about a bad death. They don't worry about dying. They just get on with living. And that's exactly what we did. And that's one of the things that legislation does for people, that allows them to realise that they don't have to worry in the future about whatever it is that they're particularly worried about. Some people are quite happy to continue in whatever state they are and get, as an American woman, an American journalist said, to eke out every second of life, no matter how grim that is. But other people aren't, and that should be their choice. But in our case, we took the case to the High Court and the Supreme Court, and Mary didn't in fact die before
I think it was 2015.
No, it was 2013, February 2013 that the Supreme Court ruled on it. And there were two things that they decided, that they said. One was the thing about the legislation, that it wasn't unconstitutional to change the law to allow assisted dying. So it didn't have to be a referendum. There didn't need to be a constitutional change. But the second thing, which is more important, and that an awful lot of people seem to have forgotten about, was that we took the case on two bases. One was that the right to life in the Constitution gave the right to die. And they turned that one down. They said it didn't. But at the same time, they felt that legislation should be brought in as a human right. But the second thing was that we took a case on discrimination. And on the basis that, as our law had been changed in 1993 to decriminalise suicide, that gave a person a legal right. It was no longer a crime to end your own life. That gave a person a legal right to end their life. Now that had to be established, because the court had never had that put to them before. So they went off and deliberated on that for a fortnight, consulted with the DPP and all sorts of other people, and a constitutional committee as well, and they decided that yes, it did give a person a right, a legal right to take their own life. And we argued then that Mary was denied that legal right by her disability. And specifically in the Constitution, under section 40 of the Constitution, there is a section that says that no law in the country can discriminate against a person based on various things, including religion and disability. So we argued that made the law unconstitutional. They upheld that. So that law has still been in existence since 2013, unconstitutionally. But nobody has ever argued against that. That the law is there, the law exists, but it's unconstitutional on that basis. But as I say, things have progressed since then. We've had various bills put forward. One of them, the first one with John Hannigan, fell because the government changed. It was a bill by an independent, and all the bills that are there that haven't been read in or that haven't been gone past the second stage, reading in is the first stage, that hadn't gone past the second stage, fell because it didn't go past the second stage. The second one was in Gino Kenny, which personally I felt leaves a lot to be desired. That bill is still there, but there's nothing being done about it. But what we really need is, as the state themselves brought a committee together, an all-party committee, to look at this issue, and came back and said that yes, we should legislate for it, that we need an all-party group to get together and draft legislation for this. But there doesn't seem to be any sign of that, and unofficially I've been given word back that it's one of the things that the current government is not going to go near because it's too controversial. There's too many other things that they are not doing anything about as well, like housing and health, but it's one of the things that they're not going to touch. Now, but they won't touch anything unless there's pressure put on them. So it's up to groups like ourselves or people like ourselves to put that pressure on them to do something about it. So we really need to start mobilising the public. The last petition that was put out on this, the last one that I'm aware of, public petition that was put out on this, 84% of people were in favour of legislation. 84% of people. Now, if that's not a mandate to our government, what is? Now, that was done several years ago, I suppose, when the thing was more, I suppose, in the public mind. And I suppose I'm going on for a bit too long now, so I'll finish up very quickly. But I'll finish up on a reasonably nice story. And one of the things that I said earlier on was that in speaking like this, it's great because speaking first, nobody knows, everybody's forgotten what I say. And I often wonder, does anybody ever remember what you say? I mean, I'm speaking about this for years. I've spoken all over the world on it. And you just wonder, does it ever make a difference to anybody? And a really heartwarming thing that happened to me 3 weeks ago sort of gave me a little bit of a spur that it's time to open my mouth again. I got an email from an ambassador, the Australian ambassador to Switzerland. Now, I didn't even know there was an embassy in Switzerland, but there is. And I got an email from the Australian ambassador in Switzerland to come to Switzerland to talk to a group of politicians that were visiting Switzerland. And I thought, but I'm involved in several things, including, well, the two main things, I suppose, in Ireland would be cannabis as a medicine, because that was the best medicine that Mary had. And as I said, the thing that two things that kept her alive were both illegal, cannabis and Nembutal, because knowing that Nembutal was there kept her alive for a long number of years. But I was wondering what it was they wanted to talk to me about. And it was that I had done a tour of Australia about 9 or 10 years ago. And while I was there, the Australians were formulating legislation that Australia was the first country in the world, apart from Switzerland, Switzerland didn't need legislation. It was never illegal. So there's no law, there's no bill in Switzerland. It was never illegal to help a person to end their life in Switzerland. They put in regulations as to how to go about that. But the first country in the world to bring in legislation was the Northern Territory in Australia, and it lasted for 2 weeks, and the federal government overruled it. And now the Australian Parliament, 10 years ago, were looking at legislation again, and I happened to be there doing a speaking tour, and they asked me to speak at the Australian Parliament. And one of the things I stressed, and one of the things that got a lot of publicity, was I told them to get it right. If they were doing it, don't bring in legislation that isn't going to work. That if you make it too restrictive, it'll be useless. And that's exactly what they did. And it was remembered that I said that 10 years ago. So they had sent, there was a delegation of 3 senators and 3, well, I suppose, members of parliament over in Switzerland to find out why people were still travelling to Switzerland. What was it about Switzerland that they could travel to that they couldn't avail of that in Switzerland? And they invited me over to talk to them because of what I had said. And that was really heartwarming. And as I say, 10 years later, somebody did listen to what I was saying. And also now I've been invited to be an advisor to a group they're putting together in the Australian Parliament. They're again bringing in legislation in the Northern Territory, but they're also redrafting the rest of this legislation, I can't say that word either, to try to make it work. And I've been asked to be an advisor to that group, which is great. But we still need to make something move here in Ireland. And the only way we're going to do that is to, excuse me for saying it, but get off our arses and get the public behind and get the public trying to motivate our politicians to do something. The politicians are not going to do anything of their own bat. We're going to have to push them into doing something. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope you'd have forgotten all that in 10 years' time.
Can I ask a question? Is that all right for the chair? I'm just wondering, I too can't understand why there's nothing happening in Ireland. It's preposterous. But what do you think about the legislation that they're trying to get through in England?
Again, it's in fact, one of the things I forgot to say is that I'm over in the UK. I've been asked to go over and talk to some of the people from the House of Lords on the 28th of November. Because again, the legislation that they have before it is far too restrictive. Yeah, it's useless. And it'll be similar to Australia, similar to other countries. Canada is another example. They brought it in there, and almost every month there's somebody going. The way they brought it in there allows people to appeal to the High Court or the Supreme Court in Canada. And almost every month there's somebody going to the court in Canada to get them included, and the court can do that. And then of course you have the people shouting, oh, slippery slope. As soon as it's in, you have to change it. But if they got it right in the first place, they wouldn't have to do that. And they're not going to get it right in the UK. And again, we'll have exactly the same problem. Swiss law is one, or the Swiss regulations. As I said, it was never illegal in Switzerland, which means they didn't have to draft a law. But I keep stressing to look at Switzerland as an example of how it works, and it really does work.
Now we get to ask Tom to shift on us. Let somebody else.